So again, full disclaimer, much of the stuff that I've learned and prepared for comes from Kenneth Bailey's work, and his shortest work is called The Cross and the Prodigal. If you want to look it up and buy it on Amazon. It's a fairly short book. In the back of it, the back third of it or so, has a play written in it that's based on this event, the parable of the prodigal son. And it struck me that I wonder if our youth group would want to sometime, if there's only 6 or 7 characters in it, so it's a fairly limited in terms of its need for participation, but would kind of symbolize and bring to life this. What were your thoughts? Let's start with that. Yes.
This Bible study I go to at St. Anne, we've been doing the parables in a study guide, Little Rock Scripture Study, and the prodigal son. I mean, this study guide is really in depth. It takes you places you never thought about before. But one of the things that he didn't mention anything about was the older son said, "You never gave me a goat to celebrate with my friends." He didn't want to celebrate with his father, but with his friends.
Yep.
And that's another element.
It's another slam. It's another slight of the father's respect. That's right. So I think it's pretty clear in the parable that the grumbling of the Pharisees and the behavior of the older son are similar. The same word is used, grumbling, and his kind of muttering to himself. It's there's certainly an echo there between what the Pharisees have been doing, and the word in the Greek in the first part, it says they're all grumbling across themselves, and that's just how humans work, isn't it? Negativity finds negativity, and they kind of cloister themselves off. So the Pharisees are grumbling. And so Jesus tells them, it's interesting, Luke says he tells them this parable. And then there are 3 parables. They're all supposed to be one. They're all linked together. My question is, what is lost in them? What's lost?
Something of great value.
So the actual items are sheep, coin, and son.
His own.
But which son was lost?
Exactly. I think the right question is, who lost?
Yeah.
These are I think they're the parables of the Father. The parables of the extraordinary, the prodigal father, almost, the extravagant father. Henry Nouwen calls the prodigal son story the parable of the prodigal father. This father's lavishness, this father's willingness to break with cultural norms, and we'll get into that in a second. I will say first, for briefly here, the sheep. Some people see these parables through the eyes of the objects that are lost, and I think that's where some of the westernization of understanding salvation through these parables. How does salvation work? Especially in the lost son, about repentance, and he was in a far way and he decided to go back. But thinking of it in terms of the person who has lost something. So when the person goes out to look for the lost sheep, people say, well, who's taking care of the 99? Right? And so, because those kind of questions rise up, especially in a post-Enlightenment mind that wants to kind of rationalize and answer all the questions. But that's not the point. The point is that those 99 have no value whatsoever if this guy isn't willing to go out and look for one. So their security, their value, is determined by the actions of the seeker. Their value is determined by the father or the shepherd who goes out to seek, to look. The lost coin. Tiffany and I have recently had, it was part of our fantastic February experiences that, of course, you know about our son's health issues. Somewhere in the first week of February, I think, Tiffany went to bed one night with her wedding ring on and then woke up the next morning and the diamond was missing. And we turned the house upside down. We know it didn't go down a drain because for some odd reason we had put little drain covers over everything in the house. So we know it didn't go down there. The places we have left to look are the dishwasher pump and the clothes washer pump system. So I haven't got to that point yet, but we still haven't found it. But it's that diamond we want. We could go get another diamond, but that's the one we want because that's the one that we lost. So the value of that diamond is determined by the seeker, not by the diamond itself. It's that diamond that's been with Tiffany and for these many years. So I think what's really lost is there's a breach in the relationship between the loved object and the person who is supposed to be in care of it. That relationship is what's lost. Notice that the father doesn't go looking for his son like he's actually wandered off. But something is lost, the relationship has been broken. So, as Dr. Hahn said, the culture was taken aback by the son's plans. And it wasn't unheard of for a father in that age, in that time, to divide up his estate and let the sons know kind of who's getting what. In fact, earlier in the gospel, somebody asks of Jesus, "Please tell my brother to give me my share." So in that circumstance, it sounds like that the father has kind of pre-divided up the estate, and the older son who is then in charge hasn't done right with it, hasn't done justice by what his father's wishes are. But the son's actions after the father acquiesces and submits to the plan or takes part of the plan of selling it within a few days, basically it's a fire sale. I mean, it's like, just give me my cash. So imagine the hurt of this family who has toiled the land. And I think in our culture we've lost the identity that people have from the land. I see it in Tiffany's family for sure. They've had this land that's been in the family for a few generations. And so the farm is more than just a perimeter and acres. It's a place where your ancestors worked to get a little bit ahead so that the next generation could get a little bit ahead and a little bit ahead. So the son it's all gone. All that advantage that your sons in the future would inherit has basically been wiped away. So the son takes off and goes into a Gentile world. In their community, they would, if the son went off and lost his inheritance in a Gentile world, they would have a ceremony that basically excommunicated, ceremonially killing the son's existence in the community. It's called the kazaza. And when he returned, that's what would have happened if he would have come back. But some things, because we're kind of pinched for time. The son, we've kind of understood the son's conversion moment as there with the pigs, when he's like, even my father's slaves have better than this. But the son, I think, is still conniving there. He's still planning, because he says, I could go back and become an apprentice. Now, those people were paid. And so he's basically saying, I'll start over again. I'll just go back, take advantage of the fact that my father's farm is still functioning, his estate is still producing money, and I will go back and do that and start over. He doesn't just want to be a slave. He says, the slaves are better, but his plan is to still be a paid employee. So he hasn't, I think that he's still basically the same person at that point. When is the redemption? Is when he's on his way back and the father runs out to see him. We hear that in our Western world, and we hear that kind of as natural, because we would say, sure, I want to go find my son. In the communities that Jesus would have been talking to, once that breach would have initially happened, there would have always been a mediator that would have come and tried to settle the issue between the two parties. The two parties would not have come together and banged out some sort of compromise together. It would have been another person who would have come and tried to say, no, you're not leaving with our dad's estate, and Dad, we can't let him do this. So it would have been some way to save face, because for the father to lower himself to actually getting involved and saying, yeah, I want you to stay, we don't hear that, but that wasn't the normal cultural attitude. So when the son comes back, he's got this idea rehearsed in his mind, but the father overwhelms that as soon as he sees his son. And the father takes the shame the son has, the shame that he's lost, the shame that he's been profligate, upon himself. Because by the father's running out, the people would have seen that as basically him lowering himself, as him putting himself in it would have been a long time if the son actually had a plan that would have attained the position he wanted to attain and kind of redeemed himself. It would have been a long time. He might have been able to talk to some of the wants at first, and then if he'd have got won their trust back, maybe got to talk to the brother, but the father would have been absent from him. And that would have been what was standard. That would have been what was right and just. But the father breaks through all that, goes out and says, I'm receiving him. And the Greek translation is of a word called shalom, which we're aware of, that the father receives him with shalom, wellness. And in that, he's made the decision to redeem him. He doesn't instate the son as in charge of the older son, but he reinstates him as fully a son, gets the signet ring, which the family used to make contracts with. So legal contracts with money. Puts on probably the father's very robe. The best robe in the house was probably the father's. Puts sandals on his feet. The slaves were the ones who were barefoot at the time. So making sure that they know that they put sandals on the feet. These are marvelous details of the picture of the father rushing out, taking the shame of his coveted, loved son's behavior upon himself to restore the relationship back to the father. And before I had come across Bailey's work, even with reading other commentaries, I had never come across that was the place where the incarnation, the salvation of God's work in our lives. And remember, this is all in response to what? The Pharisees noticing Jesus welcoming sinners. And the word isn't just eating with, it's welcoming. It's far beyond just feeding, far beyond maybe I'll eat in the same room with you. Jesus would have been the host of the party, which means he would go around each guest and lavish praise and compliments on each one. And the son was supposed to be the one seconding those compliments, the older son. Another thing that I think is important is the silence of the older son. Why was Israel chosen? What was God's plan in choosing Israel to save Goyim, all the people? They were supposed to be his institution of grace, his dock to come in and to save the rest of the nations. Right? That should have been the role of the son. And the original audience were like, what is the older son doing? Why isn't he stepping in? This just can't happen. He can't be that silent. And his silence, of course, is kind of the biggest voice in the entire parable when it gets to the end of the parable of the lost son. His silence indicts him. His silence is what is where the Pharisees have failed, where they don't understand that God's mission is to work through institutions to save, instead of being the end point, the arrival point where grace ends up. Grace goes through us. And so the son's, Tiffany, if you think of anything I'm forgetting, let me know. But the son's the elder son's silence is profound, and that's kind of the way the parable ends. Have I totally confused you? Because
One thing you mentioned to me was the son should have been that mediator
yes,
between the younger son and the father,
and we even
he
see
wasn't even, like, he wasn't gonna do that.
we even see that need for a mediator in our talks currently with the Taliban in Afghanistan. We're not talking directly with or alone with the Taliban. There has to be somebody else in the room that the Taliban leaders can go back and tell their people, we didn't make a deal with the Americans. We made a deal with our guy, and we can trust him. And the Americans can also trust this guy. That's how troubles and problems are fixed. And the son is just AWOL because he also has received his part of the inheritance, because it says he gave his inheritance to the two.
As a matter of fact, he's the opposite of the mediator. He's complaining.
And sabotaging the father's desire to reconcile. Because the evidence in this story of the son's interactions with prostitutes only comes from the older son. We don't know that from the story, from the father or the younger son, that he was involved with prostitutes. We just know that he spent a lot of money and lost it all. But the son is the one, he was out with prostitutes. And the son also, the slurs and the slights of the son, the older son, you can see those in the, when the older son says, this son of yours. And the father says, my son, your brother. He's restoring him back to that rightness in the relationship with the father. And the older son, as I said, is just mute. Like you said, I've never even gotten a goat, let alone the grain-finished beef that we're having, which Bailey thought would feed around 100 people. And this didn't happen between one or two people. This would have been in front of the entire community, because as a stranger would have walked up into that community, you'd have had slaves, kids, and servants that would have all been there. They would have all run out when the father ran out, because who wouldn't? I mean, it'd be like seeing President Trump running through your neighborhood. Wouldn't you run with him? You know, it would be natural to follow the leader of your community. And so this is probably in front of a big bank of people that all know each other. Everybody knows each other's business, just like a small town. This is a small little community that they don't have next door neighbors, they have next room neighbors. You know, each family has kind of a room in a row of houses, very small, and which makes the intimacy somehow even greater. That this is being said in front of a crowd. Yeah.
I love to write notes in my Bible, and at some point, I heard a sermon, maybe it was his.
Mm-hmm.
If the older son had known the heart of the father, he would have known the pain.
Yeah. Right.
So the older son was not empathizing with, feeling in with.
Because the son was dead. The younger son was dead when he left, and that was it. They were done. They were done interacting with him, and he was stuck there. The father is the one that seeks, that wants to restore, and we meet that redemption in unexpected ways. Notice that this younger son's story that he had planned, his lines, he never got to them. He kind of started them, but that was God's grace overwhelming him. I understand that's my own interpretation there. I'm kind of putting that into the text. But God abruptly redeems the younger son and invites the older son back in his rightful place as administrator of the Father's will, the Father's heart.
You know, one of the things that we were discovering when we studied all these parables together is that the overwhelming message of all of them is that the God's superabundant grace above what is normal, like in the paying of the
Mhm.
wages, you know, at the end of the day. And that God wants everyone to be saved, there's
Yes.
a heart for everyone, and he, you know, just to show the Pharisees that they weren't exclusive, they were used as a channel, but now is the time for
Right.
everyone.
One of the,
It's just God's amazing grace.
Yeah.
one of the greatest and most consistent pictures of God that Sean has brought to our church is to understand the world through the Father's eyes.
Mhm.
He talks about that nearly every sermon, at least once, maybe more. And this parable certainly backs him up. And there's a lot more to it. Hopefully, this will prompt you to dive into this a little bit. We need to go to our pastry mix thing. Pastry fellowship time. Father, thank you for this time in class. We give you all the glory, all the praise. We admit that and we confess that your grace surprises us. Your grace lays to waste our best plans to make good lives out of what we have and restores us in relationship with yourself. Thank you, Father. Be with us in the service. Be with Pastor Sean. Bless him, set his mind in clarity, and Pastor Sherry as well. Be with them both as they minister to us and in their personal lives as well as they deal with family difficulties. And we give you praise for the ways that you're going to work out those to your own good. Thank you for this class. Thank you for Jess, for him being willing to teach the next few weeks. We can't wait for that, and we are yours, and we have to confess our foundness to you. We've been found. We've been embraced and repeatedly kissed over and over by your love. Thank you for that gift, and help us to share it with the world. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, we pray. Amen.
Hallelujah.
Thank you, Tony.